Hey guys, today I've got this 2001 Toyota Tacoma and I need to change the belts on it. So this truck, being an '01, it's only got 43,000 miles. The owner says those are the original miles, and the belts that are on this thing, they are original and they're torn and they're about to break and come off. And I don't know if you can hear this, but the belts are chirping pretty badly too. So I'm gonna get this thing in the shop and open up the hood. You can hear a little more of that squeal. Now this engine is the 2.4 liter 4-cylinder. This truck comes with either the 2.4, 2.7, or the 3.4 liter V6. And really between any of the engines, there's 3 belts. The process is pretty similar. For example, I actually have another Tacoma here in the shop, and this one has the 2.7. So as you can see, between the 2.4 and the 2.7, the engine is basically identical. The only difference would be if you had the 3.4, the power steering reservoir is on the passenger side of the engine instead of the driver's side, and the belt comes off a little bit differently, but still pretty similar. I'm gonna change all 3 belts out, and I'm gonna show you guys how to get it done. So there's 3 belts: the power steering belt, the compressor belt, and finally the alternator belt. So we're gonna have to remove them in that order and then install them, starting with the alternator, compressor, and then power steering. For the power steering belt, I use this 14mm ratcheting wrench that I use pretty much all the time. And so we're gonna loosen up this nut right here on this pulley. It's a 14. And the adjuster is right here on top, which is also a 14. So we're gonna loosen that up. And as we loosen it up, then the pulley will go down and the belt will get loose. Now once this belt's loose, you'll have to get it off the pulleys obviously, but then it's gonna have to go around the backside of the fan in order to come off. Okay, that's the first belt right there. Now for the AC compressor belt down there, I'm actually gonna get the truck up in the air and then we'll continue. Now up under the truck, it's basically the same thing. So we're gonna wanna loosen up this 14mm nut on the pulley. Okay, that's loose. I've loosened this bolt, but the pulley's kind of stuck. See if we can tap it up. There we go. And maybe a little bit more. Good. Gotta get this belt off. And this one just comes off. No need to slide it behind a fan or anything like that. Now while you're here under the truck, you're going to want to go ahead and take the opportunity to loosen that bottom bolt on the alternator. But what you're going to want to do is come under here. So you actually want to loosen it from the back side where the nut is. Once again, it's a 14mm nut here. Okay, that's good. Just get it a little bit loose like this. That way the alternator can pivot. Now, back up here on top, all the bolts so far have been 14s, but these next ones are actually gonna be 12s. So what we're gonna wanna do is loosen up this 12 for the alternator, and then once we start loosening up the 12 for the adjusting bolt, then we'll be able to get this belt off right here. you're gonna wanna use your hand or something to just pull the alternator toward the engine. Now the alternator's a little bit stuck, so I'm just gonna very carefully just pry a little bit on the alternator to move it, like that. Definitely don't apply too much force while doing that because we don't want to break the alternator. Let's see if the belt will come off now. Pry on it a little bit more. Yeah, it should be good. Okay. Now this belt, because it goes over the water pump right here, you are gonna have to, just like how we did with the power steering belt, you're gonna have to move it around the back side of the fan. So let's just grab that belt. And you're gonna wanna work it behind the fan blades. And now it'll come out. Now you can see with all three of these belts that we took off, but they're pretty bad. They're in really bad shape. Yeah, they're all cracked and dry rotted, starting to tear in places, so definitely no good. Now as far as the new belts are concerned, I actually got these from the dealer because surprisingly it saved me like 20 bucks to get them from the dealer as opposed to the auto parts store. I think the power steering was like 10 bucks and then the other ones were like less than 20 bucks. They were pretty cheap. And if you buy all three belts at the same time, it'd be a good idea to just write on the packaging which one goes to what. That way, you know, you don't get it confused. But if you need to know which one goes where and nothing's labeled, if you look at these three belts side by side, you'll notice that the one all the way here to the left is a lot thicker. It's a lot wider. So the wider belt is the alternator belt. And then the other two belts, the longer one is for the power steering and then the shorter one is for the air conditioning. So then of course we're gonna start with the opposite order that we took them off. So we're gonna start by putting the alternator belt on. Maybe this is just my OCD, but I like to put the writing to where it's readable if you're looking down at the engine. You could put it this way, but then my OCD would bother me. So for this video, we're gonna put the belt facing this way. And we're just gonna put it behind the fan. And ultimately it's gotta go on that pulley back there. So let's route it around this pulley for the power steering, route it underneath, kind of rotate this fan, get it out of the way here. There we go. It's a little tricky doing this one-handed, but finally got it. So the alternator belt's just hanging out right there. So now we're gonna get it onto the back of onto the water pump pulley. We're gonna get it on the water pump pulley right there. We're gonna put it on the crankshaft. And then finally onto the alternator. And the new belt's actually a lot tighter, so I'm gonna need to move the alternator a little bit more. Okay, let's check it out now. There we go. And while you're getting it seated like that, make sure over here that it's actually fully on the crankshaft pulley, because if it's kind of halfway on the crank pulley, it's gonna make the belt almost impossible to get on. So make sure it's seated on all the pulleys, including on that one back there. course, people are gonna wanna know how much do you actually tighten the belt, right? Once I get the truck up in the air, I can actually show you a little bit better. But I'm good here, so I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that 12 right there, and then I'll get the truck up in the air and I'll show you. So believe it or not, there actually are specifications for how tight these belts are supposed to be. The only problem is it requires a special tensioning gauge to actually measure how tight the belts are. But you really don't need any of that. Nobody has those tools anyway. So what I usually do is on this one, that's good. If you could twist the belt more than halfway with your fingers, then it's probably not tight enough, and you're gonna wanna tighten it some more. But as you can see, I twist this belt about 90 degrees comfortably, and that's fine right there. Now, if you've gotten this belt so tight that you can't even twist it like that at all, then you're probably too tight. You might need to back off a little bit. Just keep in mind that over the next few weeks, once you're driving the vehicle with new belts, the new belts will stretch a little bit, but not too much. So I usually err on the side of being a little bit tight, but you don't want them so tight that it puts extra tension on the bearings on the pulleys. And of course, don't forget on the back side of the alternator to tighten this nut down. All right. Okay, moving on to the AC belt. I'm gonna get this reinstalled here. Put it on the crank. Run it up to the compressor. I'm gonna need to loosen this a little bit more. Okay, the belt is on now. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this adjuster tightened up. Once again, before you start tightening this, make sure that the belt's fully seated around the pulleys. Just gonna kind of feel up here. I think I need to go a little bit more. That's probably okay. And let me get this pulley tightened back up. And just remember, when you tighten these pulleys, it will add a little bit of tension to the belt. And of course, lastly, we have the power steering belt, which we're gonna have to route behind the fan blade. All right, it's on the other side of the fan now. We're gonna make sure that it's seated on the crank pulley down there. Then put it over the tensioner and the power steering pump. We're gonna get it tightened down now. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about with the belt tension. When you're checking the tension on the belt, I'll use this power steering belt as an example. You don't really wanna check it here because there's such a short distance between these two pulleys. It's hard to really get a good feel for it. You really wanna check it if possible between the pulleys that have the larger gap in between them, which would be this one down here. So, and as you can see, I mean, I can easily, with one finger, do like almost a 180 degree rotation. So that's definitely gonna be too loose. So we're gonna wanna tighten up on it a little bit more. Let me hit it. Let's see where we're at now. So I'm still able to twist it a lot more than half a turn. Still too loose. Check it out now. Okay, well, we're definitely getting there. Let me go a little bit more. Yeah, I want to say we're good right about there. I really can't go a lot more than this right here, so that's pretty good. right, all the belts are tight now, so let's go start up the truck and see what it sounds like. Definitely sounds much better. If you hear any squealing or chirping when you rev it up, then it means that that you left one of the belts too loose. So go back through and maybe tighten them up a little bit more. But we're sounding pretty good. And just to reiterate, over the next week or two, the belts will stretch a little bit, but not much, which is why I kind of err on the side of making them a little bit tighter. But at the same time, if after a week or two, if you start hearing any chirping or squealing, then you're going to want to go back through and figure out which one of them is loose, and then just tighten it up a little bit more. All right, I just got back from test driving, and this thing drives pretty nice for an old truck like this. I'm just so surprised at the miles. That's so low. This is the lowest mileage early 2000s Tacoma that I've seen. Yeah, just looking at the body, it looks pretty good. No major dents. I think it may have been wrecked a little bit in the front, so it does have a little bit of damage, but other than that, this thing's in pretty good shape. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. If you found the video helpful, just let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next repair.